Welcome in. It's Thursday, October 3rd with the EBDB Weekly Update. I'm your host, Tim Sorrells, and with me today, Brett Colleton. How you doing, Brett?
Feeling good, Tim. Week's almost over. Thursday Night Football was a lot of fun. Love a good overtime win. Daryl Hodge touchdowns, however infrequent, are always exciting. It's been a good day. How you doing?
Doing well. Always like a Thursday game when there's lots of scoring. So many times you get those Thursday games and it's just kind of a dud. Nothing happens the whole game. And this one, both teams put up some good points. That was kind of fun to see.
Yeah, super up and down. You know, lots of things to like from both sides. I feel like a lot of guys had a good game. Let's just hope Drake London isn't hurt, because when that guy's on, he looks like a lot of fun to watch. So
he does. He definitely was fantastic for sure. And you saw him in the post-game interview. Seemed to be fine, but I guess you never really know if it's bruised ribs, something else. But we'll find out next week.
And it happened super late, so we'll see. But yeah, he had a couple plays today that were just like maybe four other guys in the league can make it, and one of those guys was Mike Evans, who had a couple awesome plays today as well. So super fun game. Had a lot of fun watching it.
Kyle Pitts was the surprise though. After doing nothing last week, I'm like, is he good? Is he bad? Like all the analysts were saying, like, watch his routes, and he's not. Doesn't seem to care. Doesn't seem to put the effort into it. And then tonight just gets targeted like crazy and puts up 15. So that was good to see that he's actually involved again.
I had a couple different friends who have him on fantasy teams text me after the second play of the game. He had, infinitely more points than he had last week on one catch and 25 yards. So it looked great. 15 points and a win. Good tight end.
Sometimes it works. Did you have time to watch the games this weekend, or did family stuff get in the way?
No. We've been doing this thing where we have ironically, we have a couple that are Falcons fans that have been coming over for the games, bringing their two kids. They've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so we'll just throw on Red Zone in the background and chase kids around for a couple hours. So that's been a lot of fun. Got to see all the games, in and out while you're playing with kids. So it was a good time. I feel like this week we finally got a sense of a normalcy. It seemed like the teams that should win won in a lot more instances than the flip side than what was expected. It kind of felt like we're kind of settling into the football season this week.
You say that. I was surprised by a couple there where it's like Broncos and Jets.
Tell me about it.
Like, who expected the Broncos to win 10-9 in this game? Like,
that's a good point.
And then their QB put up 60 yards or something, and Cortland Sutton also had 60, but other players had lost yards. So it's like, how is this possible? Like, is he good, or is the defense of the Broncos just that fantastic they can shut the Jets down, and the offense can do zero and still win?
Patrick Surtain kind of feels like that corner this year, whether it's, Sauce Gardner some years, Darrelle Revis, Patrick Sherman, that guy that just like, your number one receiver is just out of this game. And I think that is, we were chatting a little bit before we started recording, but Garrett Wilson is not going to be a guy who's, good on who's running great routes, who's got the timing down. I think he succeeds a little bit more in chaos. And so, if you're doing that real formulaic stuff, Patrick Surtain is going to be all over it. Yeah, that was a wild game. I guess the weird thing about Red Zone is I didn't watch very much of it because it just wasn't there.
Nothing happened
very often. Yeah, and so that's by not seeing it very often, I guess that stands as the outlier. You see it more on the fantasy scoreboard where there's a lot of guys: Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. I think Cortland Sutton ended up having a okay day because he was targeted a ton. Mm-hmm. So a lot of being in a PPR league, that helps out a lot. But I got to start Javonte Williams this upcoming week, and I am not psyched about it.
No, that's going to be ugly. The other thing that cracked me up was the whole Raiders debacle with Devontae Adams. Like, with the post of this might have been Devontae Adams' last game as a Raider, and then the coach likes it, and then it's like, come on, man.
Dude.
We're adults here. What the heck is this?
Yeah. The Raiders, their coach has been saying some wild stuff. some stuff that feels better for like a high school or a college team, not these professionals, especially somebody like Devontae Adams, who's already gone through one trade process and, is now rumored to be leaving for every other team in the NFL. That's definitely a wild ride over there. I feel like Las Vegas is always dramatic in some sense, but man, you don't want to alienate your number one receiver like that. That just sucks.
And you had here noted too, it's like after the Rashee Rice injury, did the Chiefs get help? There's no way in hell the Raiders would bite the bullet and trade Devontae to them. But at a certain point, don't they recognize that they're not in the same league and they're not going to be good in the next 3 or 4 years? So like if the Chiefs come out with a stellar offer, why don't you take it and just say, it is what it is. Like we might be handing them another championship, but we're going to be better in 2 years.
Yeah, really tough to trade in the division like that because I think you got to think a little bit about – I don't know how much the Raiders do, but you got to think about your fans a little bit, and giving up your best player to a team that's won, back-to-back Super Bowls, especially in your division, is really, really rough. I think that is best-case scenario for the Chiefs if they come in with some Godfather offer, multiple first-round picks. But I think it's a crazy situation what's going on. Travis Kelce had a better game last week, but still doesn't look like the Travis Kelce of old. Pacheco's hurt. Rice is hurt. So you're really like Sky Moore came in and dropped the ball basically immediately. Juju Smith-Schuster is a shell of his former self who also wasn't that good. So you start looking around the league and you look at like Amari Cooper, maybe Cortland Sutton, who we talked about a little bit earlier. Some of these sure-handed guys that could come in and, they're not both of those examples aren't slot receiver guys, but maybe a guy like Darius Slayton on the New York Giants or I had another good one. I don't know, even like somebody like Ray McLeod is playing really well in Atlanta, but he's the third or fourth option on that team. And maybe you come out and get somebody who seems to be running good routes and is quick and maybe is Tyreek Jr. in that offense, just to help out a little bit. But yeah, man, except for Xavier Worthy's speed, there's not a lot of talent on that offense anymore. It's kind of sad to see.
It's ugly for sure. And Slayton, I think, is probably a reasonable one because it wouldn't cost much to get him. Yeah. And you mentioned like Devontae getting multiple firsts thrown for him. Like I also don't see that happening at this point. Because what did Diggs get traded for a fourth or something? Is that what?
Yeah, and A.J. Brown, I think, got traded for a sixth.
A.J. Brown was a first when he got traded from the Titans to the Browns. He was definitely a first. But you're thinking of Amari Cooper. It was Amari Cooper who got traded
to the Browns for a sixth, which is wild.
I think it was all salary issues, but still, it's like I don't see Devontae getting traded for a ton. Like they said, their asking price is a second, which means they'll take a third.
No, but it's crazy. You look at from a fantasy perspective, if you have one of those guys that all of a sudden goes straight to being Patrick Mahomes' number one wide receiver, even if they can do 80% of what Rashee Rice was doing, that's a huge boon for your fantasy team in a big way. So we'll see what they do. It'd be cool. I think a lot of fans would like there to be more trades in the NFL, and it just doesn't happen all that often. So it'd be rad. I hope they actually make a move because what they're working with right now, if they're sending out Xavier Worthy and Sky Moore as the main pass catchers, Justin Watson, that's just not gonna that's not gonna win them a third Super Bowl. I don't think.
Definitely not. I think it's gonna be rough sledding for them for a while, even if they get somebody. But somehow Mahomes and that team always figures out a way to make it work. And you managed to mute yourself somehow.
Oh. Next thing I wanted to talk about is this Washington offense, man. I was not a Jaden believer going into this year. I thought he was too frail. I thought he was going to get the crap beaten out of him. But man, did he put up a performance last week that was super special. The number of consecutive scoring drives that they put together is absolutely outrageous. I figured that everybody kind of had put Cliff Kingsbury in the rearview window thought that the NFL had passed him by, but man, those two guys are cooking up something special out there. That last pass that he had to Terry McLaurin was absolutely outrageous.
His completion percentage is absurd, for sure. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, I saw the stats, and he has the best start of any season, regardless of being a rookie or not. And then, like,
wow,
his 80-something% completion percentage at this point so far, which is just basically unheard of. And they're comparing him to people like Peyton Manning in the year that he had his massive year, and Brady when he had his ridiculous performance. And it's like Jaden Daniels' numbers right now are, in terms of completion percentage and accuracy and stuff that he's doing, it's that level, which is absurd. And I think 3 weeks ago, we were bashing Kingsbury for like having the most one-dimensional offense, where it's like no movement, no nothing, just go. And it's working. It doesn't, I mean, I feel like everybody likes the motion and the movement in these offenses right now. Yep. And Kingsbury's just not doing it, but it doesn't really matter because Daniels is great. He's very accurate and can move. So it's like, it's working right now. The way it all falls apart is if this is another Robert Griffin scenario where the dude just breaks himself and gets hurt. Like, that's what it is.
Real quick before we move on, they lost to the Bucs week 1, 37-20. It's not the Bucs look pretty good, but not a great loss. Beat the New York Giants by 3, beat the Bengals by 5, and then walloped the Cardinals 42-14. So if this is Jaden getting his sea legs and ramping up to the quarterback that he is going to be, so long as he stays healthy, they're going to run it. Like the Browns' defense is good, their offense is terrible. Then they have the Ravens, the Panthers, the Bears, the Giants, and they don't play another good team until they play the Steelers in week 10. So this is a heck of a schedule for a team that looks to be basically unstoppable on offense. It'd be interesting to see how far they can take this.
I might argue the schedule's a little bit harder than you might have alluded to there. I think the last 4 games, the Buccaneers were probably by far the best defense, and with how many points Atlanta put up tonight, maybe not a great defense. And then the other 3 they played, I'd say, are bottom half by far. So, like, I think the first hard test was coming this week against the Browns. And then it's, again, maybe some of those matchups are better for them. Like, the Giants are back on the calendar again. But I don't necessarily see it being quite the cakewalk that it was. Not that Jaden can't perform and be great. I just think it's going to be harder. We might not see 80% completion percentages going forward.
Yep. That being said, I think being in the position that they ended the season in last year is being of a huge benefit to them because they don't have a ton of exceptional teams on their calendar. Just running back, week 18, Cowboys, Falcons, Eagles, Saints, Titans, Cowboys, Eagles, Steelers, Giants, Bears, Panthers, Ravens, Browns. Like, Ravens are really good. The Steelers keep winning football games. Maybe the Cowboys figure it out. Maybe they get run over by the Saints offense. But, I mean, this is a team that's at least 500, maybe making the playoffs, which is quite the turnaround from last year, and a testament to those two guys and their ability to turn this team around.
Absolutely. I imagine they're going to win the division. That's my guess at this point, but we'll see. Let's move over to waivers. Lots of guys on waivers, and Max went hard this week. I thought I put a good bid in for Wicks. In terms of, like, I could have used a receiver this week that I was going to start. And I'm like, I'll put a pretty sizable offer out there. And Max just came and blew us all out of the water for Wicks and Hunt.
Yeah. I mean, blowing half of your budget on 2 guys, I wouldn't say that Kareem Hunt looked exceptional. He only played 45% of snaps. 17 touches is a lot of touches, and somebody's got to get the ball in that offense. So I know what he's doing there, but I'm just not sure that offense, if Kareem Hunt is the guy that defenses are keying in on, I'm not sure that he's going to be anything special. Similarly, Dontavian Wicks, 46 in the first 3 weeks, highest snap percent was 51%. This most recent week, he was on the field a lot more, got targeted 13 times. Only made 5 catches on those 13 targets, which doesn't feel great, but those 2 touchdowns really set him apart. We'll see as Jordan Love gets more healthy, but there's a lot of weapons on that team. So having a little piece of the offense and an offense that's going to be really good for the whole year is a nice place to be, and probably a great, Wicks can be in on any week as a flex play, but with Dubs and Christian Watson and Jaden Reed himself and Josh Jacobs all needing touches, $71 as a waiver is a pretty high number, I think.
I think it all comes down to is this worth it if Christian Watson's out for an extended period of time? Because the ankle injury didn't look pretty. Like, they rolled him over pretty good, but then the reports came out. It's like, it's a mild ankle sprain. So, okay, what's mild? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Like, I don't know. But Watson's always hurt. So at least Max has got himself a guy for a couple weeks while Watson's not playing, and then maybe longer if he makes a name for himself. I mean, he's a good player. Yep. Absolutely. I get to watch him every week as a Packers fan. So he's definitely talented. Totally. But he should have had one more touchdown. He dropped another ball in the end zone. That was right off his hands. So the guy is inconsistent with catches, as you alluded to with his receptions to targets. 13. Yeah, and not all those are perfect. Some balls Jordan Love threw weren't, on target like they needed to be. But he had issues of drops in week 1, 2, and 3. So it's not uncommon for him to have balls where he's wide open on the field and just go right through his arms.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about Justin Fields and dropping Dak Prescott. I know Fields had a great week last week, but what was the mindset there?
I'm thinking that Fields is going to be running more with his offense. I think he's slowly gotten better each week, 1 through 4, in terms of like understanding the offense, not turning it over, and throwing the ball better. And I just anticipate that as the season goes on, he's just going to run more in this offense. Yeah. And it really just comes down to the aspect of mobile quarterbacks or a cheat code. And if you got a guy like Fields, who doesn't need to be great. We saw he was the number 4 or 5 QB last year while looking like an awful NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
But that didn't matter. So I have a feeling that's what we're going to get back into here with Fields going forward. And Prescott had a good week 2 weeks ago in garbage time. But I don't know. Something about the Cowboys right now, I don't have a lot of faith in that offense. And what he's doing isn't super exciting at this point.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, you said it a couple times on the podcast that you punted on quarterback. And so I think this is just kind of what you got to do is ride the hot hand. And Fields in October, November, December has always been, a fantasy darling, because when he gets a little bit more confidence, gets his legs underneath him and starts running, good things happen. So good pickup. We'll see how it goes, and if the Steelers can stay, consistent there. Yesterday or today, the couple of pickups that we had were starting running backs. Trey Sermon with Jonathan Taylor hurt, going to Danny, and you picked up Justice Hill. Maybe not a starting running back, but definitely seeing a lot of work next to Derrick Henry. Justice, I have in another league, and the numbers he puts up are great, but not seeing a lot of the field. But when he does see the field, he gets a lot of touches. So 35% snap percent, but still 10 touches. Being on the field about a third of the time is pretty impressive. And when he's out there, he looks great.
We'll talk about it more later too, but they're not throwing the ball in Baltimore very often. And I was trying to look up the stats here for what his target percentage was, but I think he had 6 receptions last week or 6 targets last week. And I thought that there was only like 13 passes or something, or 14 passes. So he has some crazy high percent of the targets. And what Andrews got 1 target, Likely got 2, Flowers got 1. Like, that's your top 3 receivers at that point. And if everything's going to Henry and Justice Hill, I don't know. If I'm not able to start, if all my running backs are hurt, and it's just an Achane week, like, the upside of Hill is it feels like it's needed in that regard. And I waited on Sermon. Sermon was my backup in terms of like my waiver priority for that one.
Yep.
I just think it's not a great running matchup for him this week. So if it's not Jonathan Taylor, at least for this week, I don't want to be starting Sermon. And by then I shouldn't have to, fingers crossed, won't have issues beyond that.
No, you're absolutely right. I just looked up Lamar's stats. He had 13 completions and 6 of them went to Justice Hill. So you're spot on there. That's a crazy percentage of that's a 33% target share on Lamar's 18 attempts. So yeah, that's nuts that he's getting the majority of the passing work. And I think you said it. We'll get to Derrick Henry in a little bit as well. And when your number one running back looks as good as he does, you don't need to be throwing the ball down the field that much.
Agreed. Well, let's get into the week 4 review. We kind of stuck around on this for a bit. So 4 weeks are in the books. Alex still sitting on top of the league. And honestly, I'm pretty surprised to see that because that was a rough showing for those two teams.
That was a slog.
Sometimes you just get lucky. When you're the second worst team in the league, you run into the worst one. So congrats to Alex. He's 4-0. Whether we think he deserves it is a different story. But he's there, sitting at the top. And then you're sitting there at 3-1, which has been a great start for you. I would say that your team's been a bit more consistent than Alex's because you haven't had that 100-point victory yet, but just behind him. Then the rest of us closer to 2-2 or 1-3. So a lot of people sitting in that range in striking distance still.
Yeah, I mean, as we say a lot on the podcast, we don't know anything about fantasy football. It's a big game of roulette, and you can only hope to beat the person that's sitting in front of you, and that's what Alex keeps doing. Ride the 4-0 record and see how far it gets you in the playoffs. So, shout out to him. Shout out to Ben's 529. That's great. But I totally agree. Like I think the other big piece of this is choosing the right team every week, making sure that the guys you pick are the ones that score a lot of points. And I think Alex has done that pretty well over the first 4 weeks to put the best team that he can out there. Even if it's only 100 points, if your opponent only scores 88, you're going to get a W. You're going to be at the top of the league.
Yep. You're 100% right.
I'll jump into the first one because I think I was talking about Sam's team last week as well. So we have Lizzie versus Sam. Lizzie was projected to win 135-122. That got flipped on its head in a very close matchup that Sam won 151-146. I said last week after Sam put up 147 points and ran into the buzzsaw that was Max's team last week that I think she deserved to win. Putting up 151 this week, those are two really big numbers. And so I'm glad to see her get a big win. But at the same time, Lizzie's team is still good. 146 points is a lot of points to be putting up. So I think consistently, she's going to be right there. Just looking at the points for on the standings, her and Max sit at 2-2, but only 1 point separate them as the only two people who have scored over 600 points. So if you can beat them, take it as a big W because those teams are really good.
We talked about Sam's team last week. Just the hard part for her is not having a lot of running back depth. We talked that if Kenneth Walker was hurt and wasn't available to play, it would put her in a tough spot with Rashad White being that second guy. Walker looked great. So no doubts there. The guy's going to be fantastic. Just hopefully he's not somebody else when he's on bye to step into that spot. Because using Goddard as one of your flexes, that doesn't sound very pretty either. And we're going to touch more
on Dallas Goedert.
We're going to get to Walker and Goddard a little bit further, so we can probably jump off of this one. But you're right. Lizzie's team is fantastic.
Totally.
Tough loss. And if she would have got better days out of Barkley and Bowers, probably a different story. But that's how it goes.
All right.
And Katie
moving on.
Versus Brett Johnson. She's following the board.
We had Brett projected to win 135-124. Katie put up a big number. There was a lot of big numbers this week. 156. Brett scored 136. I wanted to shout out Katie. She had a very consistent week up and down her squad. Also, congratulations on her first win. Getting on the board is great. But there was an 18 and a 19 on her bench, and she still ended up winning by 20 points. Which is pretty impressive. And I know you have something that you want to say about the Ravens, like we touched on with their run game. Take it away.
Oh, yeah. It's more of just looking at Brett's team here, and Derrick Henry was a beast. 36 points is pretty absurd. And it seems that the whole identity of the Ravens now is just feeding him the ball over and over and over, and the running backs get everything. So that's I guess what's going to be. I'm not sure how Brett starts Flowers much longer. 2 points in the week with one target. Tough. It's really hard to start any pass catcher on the Ravens right now with any consistency. So he'll have to figure that one out for himself going forward. But Katie's team, all the way through, fantastic.
Yep. One person we didn't talk about in Dud of the Week is Mark Andrews. And I think he's just kind of fallen off the fantasy radar, but that's another one that you're talking about. These pass catchers who have been super consistent for the Ravens in past years, just not showing up. So I totally agree with you. They're hard to start at this point.
One of the podcasts I listened to as a joke, can they get points for blocks? Because then Mark Andrews might be one of the best tight ends in the league.
Dude, the 49ers would be invaluable at that point. Every single one of those guys blocks. Kyle Juszczyk would be the fantasy MVP every year. But I digress, Tim. Let's talk about your matchup. Favored to win by only 4 points, ended up losing by 12 to your little brother. Talk me through this matchup and how you feel about all of the shit that you have talked over the first 4 episodes of this podcast about how bad your brother's team was, only to watch him eclipse you by double digits.
It's how it goes some weeks. My team wasn't had good performances out of a few players. My team is still the story of injuries. It's not looking pretty when you look across my roster.
No.
It's a week where I 100% didn't want to start Romadunze, but again, with Brown and Adams both being hurt as my number 1 and 2 receivers, desperate times in that regard.
Yep.
And again, Chris's team has flaws. It worked out for him this week. I mean, 126 points compared to everybody else in the league isn't really cutting it. Just sometimes, like with the whole Danny and Alex matchup, where you find the right person. This is kind of how that week played out, I think. And again, some of his guys played well. Swift, that shocked me. And again, we're going to get into him in a bit as well, because that guy's been bad. But 30 points, definitely there was some bailouts in this one, for sure.
Yep. Next matchup was me versus Max. We talked about it a lot last week as though this was going to be a nail-biter, something that was going to be really close. We talked about how it was going to come down to Monday night, and it did. I was favored to win by 5 points. I ended up winning by 3 on a late Jared Goff touchdown. We'll talk about him a little bit. The only thing that I want to say here is Max's team is good, man. If you're looking across the table at him and his team every week, it's going to be a rough one. So you better hope that your team shows up, because it feels like he is going to every single week. He called it out in the chat. He's lost 2 games now by 2 points. It's a brutal it's a brutal break for him. But I'm glad he's sitting there at 2-2, because it gives us at the top a little bit of a cushion against him and Lizzie at this point, because I think they'll have something to say at the end of the year about the final standings.
Definitely. And Max is still fighting that tight end battle that a lot of us are, where Gesicki looked good the past few weeks, and then 1 reception for -9 yards. It's just one of those things that he doesn't want to start Gesicki. McBride should be the guy, but the concussion knocked him out. And it probably would have been a different story if he had McBride available. But that's just how some weeks go. It was a close one, though. That should have been the matchup of the week.
Fun.
Because the next one, game. Denny versus Alex, was not the matchup of the week. This was like the who can take the biggest shit of the week. Because what were the projections again?
There's no way that the actual projections were 101 to 88.
No, I misread that.
There's no way. Those teams must have been much higher. I don't know where you found that, but I mean, it is. You called it out, and as we said at the top of this segment, you got to be the team that's in front of you. So if you're the second lowest scorer, you just got to beat the lowest scorer, and that's what Alex did. I'm excited for you to Venmo me $100 so I can throw it into my son's college fund. I feel vindicated in that fact. But beyond Kelsey finally showing up, Jameson Williams continuing to look like the fastest player in the NFL, Danny's team they shit the bed. There's nothing else to say about it. It's, I think everybody kind of has that 1 week from hell. I think Danny's team is still good, but this was a really rough one, especially against a team that's, was 3-0 and is now 4-0 for sure.
Yeah, and I wrote it wrong in the doc, but it was 132 to 133 with the projections, with Alex favored to win by that 1 point.
That's wild.
Honestly, I was very surprised. Well, I shouldn't say very surprised. I kind of called last week that Alex's team, I think, was going to run into some harder matchups and not perform as well. I didn't expect it to be this bad in terms of the 101. No. But Danny's side, 7 points out of Josh Allen, 3 out of Breece Hall, 8 out of Ramondre, and he's fumbling and might lose his job. And then Rashee Rice getting his ACL blown out by his own quarterback. That's brutal. Rough. Like, those are his probably his 4 best players, and getting a combined 18 points, 19 points from all of them. That's tough.
Before we move on, I think Alex and Danny will be fine. I think both those teams are good.
Agreed.
Losing Rashee Rice is awful, but both of those teams will live to fight another day. I do just want to call out the fact that the only 3 teams to underperform their projected totals this week were Alex, Danny, and Mr. Chalupa Batman himself, your team, Tim Sorrells.
Yep.
Underperformed by a full 7 points in your matchup against your brother.
That just tells what scoring is. Last week was a high-scoring matchup, just not for the players the 3 of us had. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's move into the awards here. We talked about...
Let's do it.
We got into it a bit, actually, when we talked about the stud of the week. This week we have Ken Walker as stud of the week. And honestly, this is probably the reason...
Tim, let me stop you.
Yep.
Don't you have a break for...
You're right.
Awards?
I do. I got a little excited to talk about Ken Walker. All right, there we go. You're right. Transitions. Got to do it.
Booey.
Make it look good. All right. Surprise. Guess who it's going to be, Brett? Do you know who stud of the week is?
Oh, I'm on the edge of my seat, Tim. Tell me who the stud of the week is.
It's still Ken Walker. I didn't change my mind.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Surprise. You didn't see it coming. But he was amazing. That was one that we're going to tease him again in another second for a different possible award here. The 3 touchdowns out of him, and he looked like a beast. He was just fantastic. It was one where I didn't expect it coming off of the injury. I think we all knew that he's the preferred choice over Zach Charbonnet because, again, we hinted last week, Charbonnet can't keep getting away with it, and he didn't. His job is lost.
No, totally.
But without this performance, Sam would have lost 100%.
Totally.
That was the division there between the 2 of those.
We were talking about it before we started recording, that Ken Walker play where he's tackled 3 yards before the first down marker, keeps his feet, drives forward, and flips himself over. That's just like I want to draft Ken Walker next year so bad. He's just the kind of guy that you want to be rooting for on your fantasy team. He works his ass off, came back from an injury, and won Sam a week. Those are the kinds of guys that you want on your team. But I'm more excited to talk about the runner-up because we have Jared Goff, who won me my week in a almost basically garbage time pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that touchdown was the deciding factor in my win over Max. So shout out to Jared Goff, my waiver wire pickup, who ended up winning me a week. That was a lot of fun to watch, and like we said, that was probably the matchup of the week, and ending in dramatic fashion as it did was one of my favorite things about fantasy football, so that was really cool.
It has to feel good making the right call on QB2 for you. Because
Richardson,
you were so hyped on him. Promise was there. And again, it would have been a different story if he started Richardson because he knocked himself out of the game with an injury pretty quickly.
Yep. Yeah. It was I told you last week, you just can't start him anymore. And the fear with Anthony Richardson is always that he's going to go and do something within the first quarter that gets himself hurt. And so to be confident in not starting him and feeling like Jared Goff was going to be the first person, I feel like I actually do know something about fantasy football. Yet I have to start Anthony Richardson again this week because Jared Goff is on a bye. So that'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited for it.
You don't have to. Scrape the waiver wire. Drop somebody.
I like my bench, though. I'm keeping them.
I get it. All right. On to dud of the week here. Our winner this week was Breece Hall with only 3 points. It was an ugly day with Denver. That whole team just did not look good. And we had Breece Hall winning because it probably was one of the main reasons why Danny's team ended up losing this week. If you draft Breece Hall that early in the first round, I think you expect to at least get 15 points out of him. And 15 points wouldn't have made the difference in this one. He still would have been a bit behind, but it was a rough showing for sure.
But if he had 20 points, it swings that matchup, which, that's
very possible.
Yeah, not outside of the realm of possibility or what you would be expecting from your first round pick, which I think is kind of telltale this season. Most people's first round picks have been mostly disappointing in a big way, and it just sucks to see these guys that we were all really excited about being these big fantasy darlings suck. They just suck. So it's a big bummer. Just want to touch on Kyle Pitts. And super ironic that we're calling him the runner-up dud of the week because he put up 15 points, which is a great tight end week in week 5. But 0 points on 0 catches, looking like a non-factor in the Falcons' offense last week is really hard. And this is the game that you play with that guy. He's going to be every week that you start him, he's going to get 0 points. Then you're going to put him on your bench, and he's going to end up with 15. So. I do believe that he was started this week, though, so shout out to
Alex
for starting him again after basically, you put up a goose egg, and I basically think that you're worthy of the waiver wire. So Alex deciding to start him and ended up getting a good game out of him this week is a good shout. But yeah, dud of the week last week for sure.
And I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a shaky start of the week come next week. But we'll see how that one plays out with everybody else. We'll get there soon. You want to get a shaky start this week? Take that one?
I would love to. Yeah. Shaky start of the week had to be DeAndre Swift. Not only has he looked awful, he has performed awful in what looks like a pretty bad Bears offense. And the shaky start is not necessarily people that ended up doing really well, but I feel like we've kind of fallen victim to that the last week and as well as this week. But man, 29 points as somebody that I think a lot of people would have benched is huge. One of the big reasons, if not the biggest reason, that Chris ended up beating you was putting his faith in a guy that has looked like absolute dog shit behind a bad offensive line in Chicago. So I must have stung because you probably looked at that matchup and been like, this is 3 points, and 29 is a far cry from what he's been the first couple of weeks of the season.
I was excited when I saw Swift in his final roster, to be honest. I saw it, I'm like, oh, perfect. This guy sucks. The rushing offense for the Bears has been abysmal the past few weeks. Like, this is a freebie. He's going to get nothing out of this. And I was looking at his bench. I'm like, there's so many better players on his bench that should have been started. And he didn't. But it is what it is. It paid off this time. So, definitely 100% a shaky start. I think I can't remember what his percentage of starts in Sleeper was. I saw it, but it was like 30% of leagues or 25% of leagues.
It must have fallen off a cliff after last week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now it jumped back up because now he's playing well. Or he played well last week, but it's all right. That's how it goes. Sometimes the shaky start gets you. The runner-up on this one, though, was Ken Walker. God, I'm losing names here.
All good.
Ken Walker was a stud, though. He blew up, did fantastic, but I think we named him as the runner-up for shaky start because coming off of an injury with the Monday night game, there was definitely some question marks on how much usage he was going to get. Or B, does he have an aggravation before the game and they sit him last second, kind of like reminiscent of what happened with McCaffrey at the beginning of the year. It's just a major risk to put all your eggs in his basket.
Totally. I think the shaky start is kind of boiled into the situation that you're going into that with. And it's like Ken Walker's been hurt all week, limited in practice, Monday night game, could be the number one, or they could just give the ball to Charbonnet the entire time and have him as a non-participant but active on the roster. I'm experiencing that currently with Alvin Kamara. I don't have any other players that play on Monday, so even putting him in a flex spot doesn't do me any good because I need him to play, and if he doesn't end up playing on Monday night, it could totally swing my matchup. So that's why it's a shaky start. Him coming out with a great game, I think, seems very on brand for him, but that being said, it was a a nice roll of the dice and one that worked out really well, but definitely a shaky start.
Definitely. Let's get into the curses, though. Brett's curse. This is your curse.
Cursing people?
Well, this is what it is.
Who did I pick last week?
I don't remember.
Okay,
let me find it.
Go look. Yeah, you can do it.
You get into it, and we'll figure out if your curse continues.
Okay, so my Michael Scott, no, God, please no, player this week, the player I am most afraid of playing is Derrick Henry. He of the back-to-back 30-point games. The kid looks like an absolute monster. Went in the open field with a head of steam. He is laughable from the backfield to the line of scrimmage, but as soon as he gets to the line of scrimmage, he's going through dudes. And the big run that he broke off at the beginning of the Monday night game was outrageous. So he looks like he hasn't missed a step. He is quote unquote old by running back standards, but in an offense that wants to pound the rock, and he is kind of the best at that. I think when he got signed by the Ravens, this was kind of exactly what we all expected, and he looks fantastic in that offense. So really exciting, really fun to watch, but also the guy that if I'm playing against him in a week, I am not excited because I figure that he's going to put up a big number for sure.
I saw that the betting lines for him was like 80 yards or something, and his first touch of the game went for the 88-yard touchdown run. So it's
something like that. Yeah, it's crazy.
One run, and then everybody who bet the over on his yards had already taken home their money.
Wild,
which is just hilarious.
Yeah, it's great.
I went back and found your guy from last week. It was Saquon, and Saquon only had 13 points. So okay. I'm gonna call this curse. It's still alive.
Mini curse.
Yeah. Because
we'll say anything under 15 points for the person that I don't want to see the next week, I think is a curse. So we'll see how Derrick Henry performs next week for sure.
Because 33 points the week before, so half of his points. Mm-hmm. That's your curse is very much alive. And
cool.
Getting into the next curse, the Jesse Pinkman, he can't keep getting away with it award. Last week was Zach Charbonnet. And I think we're going to call this one still alive because he is no longer relevant on this one.
Yeah.
And maybe that was just we knew that eventually he was going to lose his job. And so maybe less of a curse because it's like the writing was on the wall for that one. But I'm going to take credit for it here for a little bit. So you wanted this one to be Justin Fields. And I told you no because he's on my team. And we're not cursing my players and because he needs to keep getting away with it.
Let me get 2 seconds to touch on this.
Yes.
He can't keep getting away with it is similar to Anthony Richardson. Justin Fields is a bad NFL quarterback. So the fact that he put up 31 fantasy points last week is a fucking joke. That being said, I just feel like he can't keep getting away with it. But as he is your starting quarterback, I fully support the pivot to a different person as we will not curse players on your team.
Thank you. Much appreciated. So this week we'll be cursing Dallas Goedert. 13 points across 7 receptions last week, 100% unrealistic. So I think this is just, again, looking at the writing on the wall here and looking at what should continue. He was targeted 8 times last week. And when Hurts has actual quarterback or actual receivers to throw to here, there's no way they're targeting Goddard 8 times. It's going to go back to Brown and Smith, and they're going to be the focus point of the offense. So I think that Dallas Goedert is going to crash back to earth pretty soon.
He is currently the number 1 overall tight end in fantasy, and if he didn't go undrafted in our league, I'm certain that he went in the double-digit rounds. He's a good football player, but as soon as A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith come back, there are better options at wide receiver for those balls to go to. So, I just don't think he can keep getting away with it, for sure.
Well, we're going to have a quick word from our sponsors here, and then we're going to jump back into the Week 5 preview.
Did you have a real touchdown in your fantasy football league, but it wasn't the kind you were hoping for? Don't let shitting the bed again ruin your championship dreams. Our specialized cleaning crew is here to tackle even the most disgusting messes left behind by your fantasy football squad. We'll scrub away the stench of disappointment and remove the stains of failed trades. Our services include emotional turd removal, mean to removal, will help you flush away the negativity and frustration. So Injury Crisis Management will provide support during those heartbreaking weeks when your star players go down. Coaching staff replacement. Our experienced fantasy football coaches can provide expert guidance and advice. Don't let another fantasy football season end in a pile of crap. Call Fantasy Football Foul up today and let us restore order to your league.
After those Week 4 performances, there's definitely a few of us who could use this cleaning crew to come in and fix up our mess for us. But on to the Week 5 preview. So we're a little bit late to this one, recording Thursday after that Thursday night matchup. So our first two here already had some players go. Matchup number 1 we're going to talk about is Brett Johnson versus Sam. Sam's now favored 141 to 125 after some strong showings by your team. What do you think, Brett?
Man, I just think Drake London had a heck of a night. 12 catches on 13 targets is out of this world. I think Jaden Reed and Jordan Love is a really nice stack to have for her team. Bijan disappointing yet again, only 10 points. That's rough. Chase McLaughlin, like if you swap those two scores, Bijan had 16, Chase McLaughlin had 10. That probably feels a little bit better. But I think there are a lot of guys on Brett's team that could put up the big number of the week. Kyler could go off. Derrick Henry could go off. Jamar Chase could go off. Debo could have a big week. I think this one might be pretty close. I expect both of these teams to put up big numbers as well. I don't really have a horse in this race. I think that both of these teams are good. I think this is going to be a fun one.
And Brett was talking some smack about Bijan in the chat earlier tonight. Definitely not what you expect with somebody you invest that much draft capital into. And the funny thing is, if we were taking the other B. Robinson, he'd probably be a lot happier with the results. But it doesn't work out that way here.
Brian Robinson's hurt this week, so maybe not.
Well, we'll see. Could just be minor. We'll find out.
Yep.
Our next one here is Katie versus Alex. Again, after a good start to the week, Alex is favored 139 to 117. Baker looked fantastic. And Pitts, we talked about, after a dud from last week, I think most of us would probably have dropped him from our rosters. Would even consider starting him. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I benched him in other leagues that I had, and I started other players instead, and obviously regretting that now. But looking at a dud last week, I'm not sure how you do that. That was tough.
Godwin comes back to earth a little bit. He's kind of been falling off. I think Baker Mayfield is a ton of fun to watch. 23 points is a good number. It's not a outstanding or stellar number by any means. So I think this will be. I'm a little surprised that the line has moved so much to 61-31. I think that's maybe a little outdated, but I think it's telling of Katie's running backs. Chuba Hubbard and James Conner are not really showing out, but we'll see how it goes. Katie got her first win last week. Maybe her team puts up similar numbers. I think having Laporta and Pollard on a bye is pretty rough. Those are two people that you're hoping. Even though Laporta's start to the season has been super duper slow, you're still banking on him being a big contributor on a weekly basis. So with those two things out, it's going to be a little bit rough. There's a lot of injury uncertainty on both of these teams. Joe Mixon, Travis Etienne, Deontay Johnson, Njoku, Dubs. Like this is going to be one to monitor going forward, because I think on Sunday maybe these rosters both change a little bit.
Yeah, and you might want to walk the Chuba stuff back a bit, because he's had 2 great weeks, 27 points and 22 points. So he's been I'd say it's pretty exceptional for a running back that you drafted super late. So he's been good. Chicago was a better defense, though, so I think it might be a little bit tougher sledding for him. And then same thing with the San Francisco defense. I don't see that matchup being easy for Connor necessarily either. And I imagine San Francisco is probably going to be putting up points on them, so maybe not running the ball quite as much. Either way, though, it is 2 good teams here I think it'll be a bit closer than that projection suggests when things actually play out.
Totally. Yeah. The only thing I'll say about Chuba Hubbard is the thing that you touched on briefly. Is the Chicago defense has looked really, really good, and so if they can stop the run, I'm not sure that Andy Dalton can figure it out to the point that they're, fielding a bunch of fantasy studs in that offense. So we'll see how it goes. He's been great. He's basically carrying the team in our dynasty league for me. So, but I think that's a good matchup. That one will be fun to watch for sure.
Our next one here is myself versus Max, with Max favored to win 121 to 113. And we talked about it a bit before. The story of my team is just injuries. Everybody's questionable, and it's a matter of who's going to actually be available to start when Sunday rolls around.
Yeah, man, you're in a bad way, especially if DK doesn't start, Brian Robinson doesn't start. I'm not sure how you're going to field a complete team. That's super rough. At least you're catching him on a week where he doesn't have Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been really good.
Neighbors probably won't play either. They say Neighbors is a long shot.
Yeah, I didn't see that. That's crazy. So I feel like you're catching Max on a good week. Kareem Hunt is questionable. McBride's questionable. Shakir's questionable. Woof. We finally get into the thick of the NFL season, and it's a lot. This is really when fantasy gets tough, where you're trying to figure out how to field an actually competitive team. So this is one to watch. Achane could pop off, Fields, Daniels, Kyren. I feel like those top four are going to be really interesting, but it really could be, the difference could be that the only real stellar receiver between these two lineups is Chris Olave. And if he puts up a number like he should, that may be the thing that swings it.
We'll see, because it's the 121 to 114 projections. That's low. I mean, it feels like even though Max has a good team, you're right, part of it's bye weeks and such, but we're getting into the part of the year where the combination of bye weeks and injuries, you're not going to have that loaded roster that you did 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think that's going to be a closer one when it all plays out. And we'll just have to see who's available. Last one here is you versus Chris. I'll hand this one to you.
We've talked a lot about Chris's team. I feel pretty good. That being said, T. Higgins looks like he's getting his legs back under him. Running backs are at a premium, and he's got 2 really good ones. Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones are both really good. But other than that, if anybody needs wide receivers, come and call me. I got a bunch of really good ones. I feel really lucky to have the guys that I do. Being able to slot CD and Nico Collins in my roster solves a lot of problems for me. But like we said earlier, having Kamara be, on the fence, whether or not he's starting, my only real running back option at this point would be Raheem Mostert, unless I feel like starting Braylon Allen against a good Minnesota defense, which I don't. So it's hurt Raheem Mostert, back up Braylon Allen if Kamara's not ready to go on Monday, but we may not know that until game time. So Chris may catch a break where if this one's close going in Monday night with Kamara not starting, could swing this thing. So, this will be one to monitor, but I feel pretty good.
And Chris is feeling a little ballsy here, benching Tyreek Hill at this point, which I don't blame him for doing it.
No. We talked about in the last podcast about getting Tyreek the ball in space and allowing him to use his speed. And I feel like on Monday night they tried to do that, and just to literally no avail. They were running him on a bunch of jet sweeps on a lot of short options and stuff like that. And it's not his inability to separate, it's the fact that the entire defense can point themselves at making sure that he doesn't beat them in any significant way. And 7 catches, 8 catches, but 12, 20, 30 yards doesn't make him the fantasy stud that you expect him to be. So it's a bold move, but at the same time, I totally get it. It may be the right one as well.
It looks like who he probably slotted in there. It's got to be either Swift or Robinson, and riding the hot hand with Swift against the bad Carolina defense. Maybe I don't think we see 30 points out of him by any means, but 12, 13, not unrealistic. And then Wan'Dale Robinson, I'm not sure if you saw this, he is the 5th most targets of any receiver in the NFL this season, which is absurd.
Yeah, It is really interesting because you look at Daniel Jones's numbers, and Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors are getting something like 95% of the targets in New York, and it's like they target Malik Neighbors on all of the good routes and Wan'Dale Robinson on all of the bad routes, and so Wan'Dale Robinson is going to end up with games where he has like 13 fantasy points and it's 11 catches for 10 yards and 10 yards rushing or something like that. So it's an interesting pick, an interesting player in a fantasy context because he's like good for fantasy but bad for football. And so we'll see. I think Wan'Dale's been kind of fantasy relevant for a couple of years now for this exact structure. It's just weird now that they have like a legit wide receiver one that defenses are keying in on to open him up a little bit for all the underneath stuff that he does well.
Right. He had 14 targets last week for 11 receptions, but only 71 yards. Totally. So it's like the yards per catch is abysmal, but if it's PPR, who really cares? Because that's 11 points for nothing. Exactly.
Totally.
So I think that guy will go off for Chris. Or maybe not go off, but I see him having a strong week to keep this close. Our matchup of the week, though. After last week's dud, I feel like we need to have one that's a bit closer and a bit more exciting.
We need to hit.
I don't know. We'll see if we do. It's Lizzie versus Danny this week. Lizzie right now after the Thursday night games here is favored 122 to 116. So the points don't seem super exciting, especially with Mike Evans playing well and getting 23 points tonight with her only favored 6 points. It seems a bit lower scoring than the typical matchup of the week that we'd have.
You and I both really like, we've talked a lot about how we like Danny's team, but I would like to bring back up my Ramondre Stevenson hate. He has not been good the last 2 weeks, and I expect that to be the norm going forward. The thing that we need to call out, like Jamison Williams on a bye, Calvin Ridley on a bye, Devonta Smith on a bye and hurt. Kendre Miller, I don't know, is fully healthy, but on the Lizzie side, her two big guns, like she's got to start Roshan Johnson and Devin Singletary because Saquon and David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown are all on her bench. Mm-hmm. So I think this is her bye week from hell, and if she can survive this with a win and get herself to 3-2, because I think the reason that we have this as the matchup of the week is this is kind of we need a win. Like, let's get us on the right track. Let's get us moving forward from 2-2 with good rosters. Get us to 3-2. Be on the top side of the league rankings. But if Lizzie can come away with this with a W, then she's got her studs basically locked in for the rest of the year, and she's going to be tough to beat. So, 23 points from Mike Evans in week one is huge. To start the week is huge. But we'll see how this goes. It's going to be an interesting one for sure. But I fully expect Lizzie to pull this out and win it.
And she's got to be beating herself up over that 31.5 points on her bench with Mooney. That's tough. That just hurts.
Man, Darnell Mooney might be the best receiver in the league.
I mean, was great.
They target him like crazy. 16 targets. 16 targets. 9 catches, 2 touchdowns. He had a hell of a game. I'm not sure that anybody expected this from him, but the thing I'll call out is if you look at his snap percentage, he was on the field 95% in week 1, 100% in week 2, 93 in week 3, and 96 in week 4. He's on the field a lot. Kirk Cousins likes throwing to him. 16 targets is absolutely absurd. But
and the
he
defense
did a lot
will
with
key
him,
in on London forever.
Yeah. I was telling you, I think Drake London might be the biggest person that I've ever seen on a football field. 6'4", just an absolute monster of a human being. And so if defenses are focusing on him, that leaves a lot of space for Darnell Mooney. You would think it would leave a lot of space for Kyle Pitts, but it apparently does not. And so Darnell Mooney is really the benefactor of this. So, Lizzie, if you want to trade him, come call me. We'll talk
The only
about
guy
it.
bigger than London is Pitts, probably right next to him at 6'6". So you just didn't look. You didn't look one spot over on the line.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's all right.
Wild.
I get your point. Your point makes sense here. Last thoughts for Danny's team.
Please.
Pittman's the scary thing for him. Pittman's great if Flacco's the quarterback. If he's not, the targets are useless, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just don't know the connection between a chaotic quarterback like Anthony Richardson and a good wide receiver. Like pick a wide receiver that would be good with Anthony Richardson as their quarterback. I'm not sure. Like we talked about Garrett Wilson thriving in chaos. Maybe that's the kind of guy. Maybe somebody like Tyreek Hill, where he doesn't have to make a lot of, Tyreek's down there somewhere is kind of the thought, and he could just throw it really high in the air and he'll catch it. But if you have a technically sound wide receiver, a big body, Anthony Richardson is not finding those guys. It's just not going to happen.
And not that Denny's a better choice. Again, lots of bye weeks this week for him, so it's
you got to start him.
You're forced to start him,
Yeah.
but just one that I would be concerned about. And Danny probably is concerned, but at this point, it is what it is. Nothing we can do there.
Totally.
Any last thoughts on this week before you want to wrap this episode up?
No, I'm excited. I think we're kind of in the thick of it. Everybody's got to win. I think everybody's got good teams. I continue to be excited about trade possibilities. So if you guys look at my team and want JSN or Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb or Nico Collins looking for a wide receiver, hit me up because I need running backs pretty bad. So
Guys,
holler at me. I am
Brett Colleton
happy to make some moves.
loves 2-for-1 trade offers where the second person you're giving him is worse than the player you'd have to drop to keep them. So please hit him with that kind of offer because that's his favorite to receive. He loves it.
Call me Brett Johnson. We'll talk about it.
Oh, poor Brett. He's always on the receiving end of the trade shit talk, but it is what it is. He came in here, his grievances. He's going to get it right back. That's how it's going to be.
Totally.
Well, that's going to do it for this week. We'll be back after this weekend's matchups and talking some more nonsense and maybe talking some more shit about Brett Johnson. We'll see how it goes.
Good luck, y'all.
Bye, everybody.